Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brett Keane, and today I'm here to interview. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Zach Black, co-founder, creator of Satanic International Network.
Now, you're saying that you're a Satanist, and you also kind of hold a position of atheism, correct? What would be the difference?
Well, see, yes, basically, the majority of Satanists don't believe in God or the devil, and I would pretty much say that any Satanist that isn't an atheist is really not a Satanist. We take on the label Satan or Satanism or Satanist because Satan represents the adversary. He represents the one that, called out God and questioned his will. And it's not a religion, it's a philosophy. So that's kind of where Satanism and atheism different, is where atheists just simply don't believe in God or the devil, but Satanists typically take that to the next level where they directly oppose religious ideology and organized religion.
Now, as you realize, some people would probably ask you, if you don't believe in a metaphorical Satan, then why even take upon a name that you know will draw attention or even negative representation of you? As you know, Satanists have tended to get throughout history. Why not just refer to yourself as a non-believer who enjoys some of the philosophy of Satanism? Go ahead.
Okay, because again, it comes back to the adversary. Satan has always been the adversary. He's always been the judger. He's been the accuser. And Satan is also symbolic of passion, of carnality, of lust. I mean, we don't view Satan as an anthropomorphic deity. We view him as more of an archetype that we aspire to be. And that is why. I mean, certainly carrying the label Satan or Satanism is kind of like putting a bullseye on your head. And, I generally don't go around advertising in my personal life that I'm a Satanist. It's kind of on a need-to-know basis. But that's pretty much the reason.
But you yourself, admittedly, you have had a lot of success and popularity on YouTube as a Satanist. And obviously, the more popular you get, the more harder it's going to be for a guy like yourself to walk around without people noticing you and saying, "Hey, I know that son of a gun from YouTube. He's a Satanist." How do you think that would affect you?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because it actually has. And only recently I made a video and it went viral and got about 2 million views. And one of my neighbors and one of my coworkers were like, "Hey, I've seen you before." And I was downplaying it. "No, you haven't." No, you're that dude from YouTube. It's like, oh, shit. Okay, here we go. That's, I mean, I don't hide the fact that I'm a Satanist, but I don't advertise it. I'm not one of those guys that wear a Slayer shirt and a big, inverted pentagram. I mean, I go about my everyday life, and I generally don't advertise the fact that I'm a Satanist, but I don't hide it either. And I kind of figure it's on a need-to-know basis with people. If you don't need to know, then I usually run the gamut of being an atheist or an agnostic, because I like agnostic best because no one knows what the fuck that means. And, it's kind of, it leaves you a lot of leeway for philosophical adjustments.
It's fair enough. I've noticed from talking to Satanists in the past, whether it be in live chat or blog TV or even in Skype interviews, that one of the biggest aggravations Satanists appear to have is what is referred to as, pagans also use this term, fluffy bunnies. Do you recognize this term?
Fluffy bunnies. I'm not really familiar with that, but I have a clue of what you're getting at. A fluffy bunny would be, I would guess they're talking about somebody who carries the label as Satanist, but are more like Wiccan or pagans, or, they're more like, basically, I mean, dare I say it, pussies that like the identity but don't actually live up to the name.
Pussies and what you said is pretty close, but pretty much the idea is it's a person who dresses up in goth clothes and pretends either to be a pagan or pretends to be a Satanist, but they have no appreciation or respect for the philosophy and what you guys actually stand for. They don't even understand the foundation. They just do it to be cool. Have you ran into a lot of that, and what do you usually say to folks like this?
Yes, I run into a lot of that, especially online. I see that, on the street. I live right next to a high school. I see those groups of guys. And you know what? At one time, I was one of those guys, although I've always had appreciation and understanding for the philosophy of Satanism. But at one time, there was a need for an identity. There was a need to openly shout out to the world, hey, look, I'm a Satanist, and that was kind of a rebellious thing. And I learned quickly after a couple of years that it was counterproductive. I don't know. I kind of encourage it. I think that it's, although 95% of those people will never make it out of Hot Topic, that's kind of what I like to call it, is a Hot Topic Satanism. Satanist, but at the same time, it's just, teenage angst and rebellion. But there's a place for that in Satanism, and I encourage that. I don't look down upon them for it. I just look at them as being in their infancy.
All right, I'm going to have to pause it for a moment. There's a little bit of squeal to the mic, and then we can continue.
Okay.
One of my next questions is a question that I ask religious people as well as non-believers. Why Satanism? Why not, let's say, become a Muslim or a Christian or even a pagan and stuff? Why was Satanism so the thing that really was for you? Why not something else?
Well, basically, I stopped believing in imaginary friends for adults by the time I was able to logically think for myself, which is about the age of 10. I just, as much as I wanted to believe that there was a all-loving God and an afterlife, as soon as I was able to, think critically for myself, it just was, it's just bullshit. I just didn't buy it. And even before I identified myself with Satanism, although I would not call myself an atheist, because I was raised in a Catholic home, it's just not for me. I don't believe in an afterlife, and I don't believe that there's somebody who gives a fuck if we masturbate or, whatever. It's just the whole idea of deities and God and, religion, it just wasn't for me. And so I just started to kind of look into more alternative, and I say that in quotations with my fingers, alternative forms of religion and philosophy, and eventually I found my way to Satanism. And when I read the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, I really resonated with it. It was like something, it was kind of like looking in a mirror. It was like, wow, this makes sense. Now this actually makes sense to me. And that's why I went the route of Satanism and not Buddhism or Islam or whatever. It just seemed to fit. It seemed to fit and resonate with how I personally felt as an individual.
Here's a question and stuff that might be a little bit more difficult, but is it possible for a Satanist, at least in your view, to have a successful marriage or relationship with, let's say, a Christian or someone of faith, Muslim female, for instance?
That is something that I've been struggling with for a little bit, but I would say yes, it is possible, and it can be done successfully, because ultimately, if you love somebody, if you relate to them on a personal level, on an intimate level, for me, their religious preference is not a make or deal breaker. There's a lot more make or deal breakers than what they believe spiritually. It only really comes into play within if what they believe in religiously or philosophically impede on my own philosophical beliefs. So, I could easily marry somebody who's Catholic or Christian who doesn't view Satanism as the evil Hollywood stereotypical, devil worshiping, eat your babies type view. For me, it doesn't really matter. Religion is not the first thing I look at when I'm looking for, a girlfriend or a maid or a wife. I look at, personal compatibility. I look at stuff like that first. And unless they're completely corrupted by their religious beliefs to the point where they're intolerable towards others, which, is often happens, but unless that's the case, I don't see it as a real deal breaker.
As you've probably heard, and you may have found yourself in arguments like this, one of the big things that Muslims and Christians and people of different faiths like to do is they like to say that their morals and their ethics come from their particular God, usually by pointing at their books and saying, these ancient, cryptic tomes, this is where I get my love and how to treat people and all this. Where do you think you get your morals and ethics from?
Well, I personally believe that most people, in fact, dare I say it, all people, as children, we develop our own personal sense of ethics and morals, versions of right and wrong. And a lot of that is based on simple principles like, treat others like you want to be treated. And I know that's a very Christian motto, but we have a sense, especially children, have a sense of inner morality that just kind of comes with life. I mean, granted, that will be tainted by their philosophical and religious oppression. But I believe if that's not oppressed and you just let them run without religion, without, said morals and guidelines, I believe that the majority of people would be decent people. I don't think we necessarily need an organization or a religion to tell us what is right or wrong. I mean, is it right for me to come up to you and smash you in the face with a brick and take your wallet? Probably not. And I don't think most people would have that desire regardless of their religion. So I don't think religion is necessary for morality whatsoever. In fact, I think it does the worst because when you repress people's desires and you tell them what they can and can't do, that becomes compulsion. It becomes some sort of almost fetish for them to rebel against that if they have that inclination. So I really think that just let people go with the way they're going to go. People are raised or born. Raised is the wrong word. People are born with a natural sense of morality.
I have to hit stop again. It's doing that loud squeal. All right. One of the things I've discovered about Satanists as well as atheists and agnostics is they have a tendency to, even some statistics were done in America recently about who has pretty much the most knowledge and understanding of the interpretations of, let's say, the Bible. Atheist and Satanist came out on top. I don't know if you realize this, as the ones who know the Bible actually more than the religious groups who tend to base their faith upon this. Now, my question is this. Does it bother you in any way or aggravate you that they represent the Satan figure as being this horrible evil force, but Satan never actually kills or harms anybody in the Bible unless God himself tells him to do it? The Bible is filled with hundreds of verses where God murders babies, men and women, but Satan doesn't harm one single person. So why is he looked at as the bad guy, at least in your view?
Well, I think Satan is looked at as a bad guy because he needs to be the ultimate scapegoat. I mean, there needs to be somebody to fear in religion because religion is driven by fear of, everlasting damnation, and there has to be a scapegoat, and Satan is the ultimate scapegoat. if you don't follow our rules, well, guess what? You're going to meet this evil guy, and his name is Satan, and you're going to burn in hell for eternity. Yeah, but I don't really get caught up in that type of mythology because it's just that mythology. It's myths. It's made up by man. It's not real. There is no real Satan. There is no real God. And Satanists use Satan for its archetypical value, not because we believe he's an actual deity, but because we believe in a romanticized way of what he represents. He represents the adversary. He's the accuser. He is the one that questions God's will. He stands for lust. He stands for carnality. He stands for passion. He stands for the here and now. And so Satan in the Bible and what Satan represents in Satanism are completely two different things. But if we're going to touch upon the atrocities of God versus Satan, oh yeah, I mean, hands down, God wins. You're right. Satan does not kill people, only allegedly if you go to hell, right? But it's really not written about. So, yeah, I see what you're saying.
There's an ongoing thing. I'd like to hear your opinion on this. In Africa, there is just thousands of times this has happened. I did a video about this recently, where preachers go over to these small superstitious tribes and tell these mothers that their babies are possessed by demons. And what ends up happening is that the preacher ends up having a ritual in which they torture these children. Or they end up taking their children and throwing them out in the street where they don't have anyone to take care of them or love because the damn preacher said that they have demons or devils running inside of them. What would you say to something like that?
Yeah, I've heard of this before. I've been in contact with a couple guys. One guy goes by the name of the Paranormal Preacher, Reverend Modal. And I'm also follow Bob Larson, that douchebag nuthead. And I'm aware of what you're saying, although I'm not an expert on it. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's just one more excuse for sadistic religious priests and religious activists to commit crimes against humanity in the name of God. I mean, can you really think of another crime against humanity than to deprive a mother of her child and say that it's possessed and then just throw the child out into the wilderness? I mean, talk about someone who's truly sadistic. I mean, that really takes the cake.
Now, Christians and a lot of different religions have misrepresented Satanism over and over, of course, trying to make you guys look like the bad guys, but I'm an avid reader of the news. I watch the news, as depressing as it is, and all I ever hear about is priests either fucking little kids or religious people hurting children and doing awful things to their people of their church. But you never hear about a Satanist, fucking sacrificing a cat like they try to represent, which is obvious bullshit. You never hear about a Satanist who molested a kid or did anything like this. So how is it that you guys still hold the bad label and these assholes still look like the righteous saints of God?
Well, that's interesting because in the early 90s, there was a investigation. This is during the height of what we call the Satanic Panic, back when there was a uprise of what they call satanic ritual abuse. There were people coming saying that they, of course, under hypnosis, remember now, there's been many books and many millions of dollars made out this old nonsense, said that, they were victims of satanic ritual abuse. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their businesses because they got caught up in that. And it's really sad. It's really sad. The FBI, in fact, it got to the point where the FBI did an investigation, and it's documented in a couple books, one by Arthur Lyons called The Second Wave of Satanism, and another one by Arthur Lyons called Satan Wants You. And he goes into more detail than I can about the FBI's investigation. But the bottom line was the FBI did a pretty thorough investigation that lasted for several years and found that there was no no substantial evidence for these ritual, abuse cases that Satanists were out there killing people or mutilating animals. But one thing I would like to point out is crazy people do crazy things, whether it's in the name of God, whether it's in the name of Satan, whether it's in the name of Allah. People do crazy things. And sometimes people will, do some asocial, immoral act, and they will scapegoat on Satan. Oh, like, say, Richard Ramirez or the son of Sam, who both claim that Satan, led them to do these, to murder and rape women and whatnot. But, crazy people do crazy things, and that's not a Satanist. That's somebody who's using Satan as a scapegoat to justify his own immorality and his own antisocial actions.
How do you feel about this? You've probably heard about this for years, especially when metal and rock was the most popular. You've heard about how they try to define some certain forms of music as satanic. I mean, what does that mean to you when you hear people try to define music as satanic or dark or evil? What does that mean to you?
Well, when it comes to it really depends on the source. There are legitimate musicians that are Satanists. There are legitimate musicians that are inspired who would identify themselves as Satanism, and it's very well known and expressed in their music, going back from, say, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, up to modern day music like Marilyn Manson, Electric Hellfire Club. These people have affiliated and identified themselves with Satanism, and the message that they're trying to convey is very satanic. But then there's a lot of other people that say, oh, this music's satanic, and, that's just because, it's heavy metal, and, that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I would say any music that gets a rise out of people and gets them up off their ass and doing something, I would say is satanic. But there are definitely, no doubt about it, many musicians of notoriety that have identified themselves as Satanists on record. I just mentioned a few of them that are legitimate Satanists.
All right. One last question for you is basically, when you look at yourself and stuff, do you see yourself as a charitable person? Is there a contribution that you feel that needs to be made to the world? What are some of the goals that you have or ambitions that you'd like to see happen for your particular group and yourself as an individual?
Well, for myself, that's pretty easy. I mean, I just want to live my life. I want to enjoy my life. I want to, gain the most pleasure and rewards from my life. And I'm not talking in a materialistic way. I'm talking just about a personal sense of self-satisfaction and gratification. When it comes to Satanism and my contributions to Satanism, I would like to basically push Satanism out into the open. I would like to, in mainly a subtle way, and not just full force, wave the flag of Satanism in the face of politicians, nothing like that, but more so just encourage people to, and again, not if they don't want to, but if they have the ability and the mindset to, encourage them to live their lives as individuals, to be their own adversary, to be their own gods, to realize this is the one and only life you're going to have, to make the most of it, live for the here and now, do what you need to do to make you happy, and live your life that way. And people are doing it. And my job, what I consider my job anyway, or my secondary job, I got a couple, but would be to promote Satanism the best way that I can, and the best way that I am doing it currently is on YouTube, and having this social network called Satanic International Network. It's kind of like the Facebook of Satanism, and it's kind of made it so that we don't need to join an organization like the Church of Satan or the Temple of Set. You know, it's a network. There is no high priest or whatever hierarchy anymore. There's no rigid structure. It's just a meeting ground for people of like-minded people to get together and do their own thing. You know, make contacts with each other and relations with each other, to exchange ideas, to grow, to learn. I mean, that's kind of where we're going at this point.
Well, hopefully people can evolve and open their minds and try to learn from each other and have that communication that you speak of. I've always thought that education is one of the most important things. With education and understanding, I think people will get along a lot better. I really appreciate you doing this video with me. If you wouldn't mind, can you plug whatever websites you have or YouTube channels? And that'll be that.
Sure, man. I appreciate you doing this with me, too. And, yeah, I'll start with the network. It's Satanic International Network. The website is satanicinternationalnetwork.com. And it's the most active, fastest growing satanic network, period, ever. And currently has 4,000 users. My YouTube channel is called Satanic International. And then I have another YouTube channel called The Satanic Network. And yeah, I've created it just as a way for like-minded Satanists to meet, to socialize, to exchange ideas. And it's very productive. We have a live chat room. You know, we get in there every night, and we talk face to face on webcam. You know, and it's going very well, and it's continuing to grow exponentially. So yeah, I'm really happy with the results and with user outcome.
I appreciate you spending time to do this interview, and just go ahead and, if you wouldn't mind, type out your YouTube channel as well as your website so I can put it in the annotation of the video so people can check you out. I encourage anybody out there that's watching, check these guys out, talk with them. They're cool cats. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Brett.